The date is the 22nd of September, and I get a message from my real life friend, who you know as Hawkman. And he said, inspired by the way you pronounce WYVERN, how can we create a WYVERN and Shirley build? To which I replied, firstly, secondly, well played, thirdly, who is going to be Shirley? He said, I refuse to explain why the funniest thing I can think of is mantis shrimp. And I said, that is kind of funny. That build is also absolutely terrible. I'm going to have to lab it. So then he thought about how do we synergize the WYVERN. I said I think an XP build is kind of lame. And then we settled on the challenge being, I have to hit a bunch of WYVERNs, aiming for turn 9, getting 3 mantis shrimps, and then getting a 10 piece. And just like that, the WYVERN and Shirley build was created. Okay, we are off and running on the very stupid WYVERN and Shirley build. But before I begin, I want to address a comment that was made in my Ellie Blow 2.0 video by a guy called Be Happy Dude. And basically he criticized me chatting too much before talking about the build. And look, I want to take it on board. I thought people enjoyed my stream of consciousness type of style. But to address this, I actually made some notes. Because I need to tell you what WYVERN and Shirley is, because most of the younger audience wouldn't know. So we'll start by addressing WYVERN and Shirley, then we'll get into the build. Thank you for the feedback, Be Happy Dude. WYVERN and Shirley. I've heard of it. Many of you wouldn't have. It was a 1976 sitcom. It ran for 8 seasons. 7 out of 10 rating on IMDb, in case you were wondering. So, by the way, I have to explain this, because otherwise you're like, WYVERN and Shirley? What the hell is this? It's a very stupid play on words on Laverne and Shirley. You've probably figured that out. Synopsis, brief synopsis. It's Laverne and Shirley. Obviously, the namesakes of the show. They are friends and roommates, and they work together in a Milwaukee brewery. And both characters were actually introduced in Happy Days, the wildly successful sitcom, making Laverne and Shirley like a spin-off of that. So, who are Laverne and Shirley? Laverne, Wikipedia describes her as a tough-talking tomboy whose favorite drinks are milk and Pepsi, which was likely early, product placement from Pepsi, and people probably weren't as privy to the fact that there was product placement in their shows back then. So I expect that Pepsi's value rose dramatically from having Laverne have Pepsi as her favorite drink. Shirley, on the other hand, of course, you have to have a bit of yin and yang if you're having like a Laverne and Shirley or Dharma and Greg style of show. Shirley, Wikipedia says that she was more perky and positive, but reserved, sensitive, more classically feminine in many ways, I guess you could say, whereas Laverne, more tomboy, tough. You can see the yin, the yang. And there were a variety of minor characters. Some of the Happy Days characters came over and appeared, but they weren't consistent. And I guess the other 2 main characters were, they had 2 male, roommates, or not roommates, neighbors. I think they lived above. And they sort of initially were viewed as being pesky men. What are they? They're up to no good, but they eventually came to be lovable and sort of icons in many ways, I guess. So that's the synopsis and the characters. This, by the way, this is just also you can understand the joke that's happening here. The setting of the show. So like I said, it's Milwaukee. Same as Happy Days. Filmed in the late 70s, but set in the late 1950s, actually. So 20 years earlier. And this procured a wide target audience because younger people could connect to Laverne and Shirley and the process of becoming an adult and pursuing your dreams and balancing that with real life. But older people connected to the nostalgia of the 50s. 50s, magical time in the West, all over the world, but especially the West, post-war, baby boom, economies kicking goals. So, older people in the 70s connected to their youth in the 50s. Young people connected to the characters of Laverne and Shirley. So quite smart, actually, if we're being honest. And the final part of my notes here is that I may be actually underselling the success of Laverne and Shirley, because what I read online is it was arguably the most popular show in the world by its 4th season. So ran for 8 seasons. By the halfway mark, they'd pretty much passed everything, and people really waited for was it a Tuesday night slot or a Sunday night slot to watch Laverne and Shirley. That is my notes. Just like now you understand the WYVERN, WYVERN and Shirley reference. More than my notes, I did have some. I've called it bigger picture questions. So let's just quickly get out of just like the pure universe of the show and let's think bigger. First point I had as I was researching was, why was Laverne and Shirley so popular? My first thought, is it because it subverted the expected 1950 gender roles? They were both ambitious women. They weren't always presented, with class. They were quite gritty at times. So, did people connect to that it wasn't following gender stereotypes? Or maybe it was just good writing and acting. People seem to say they had great chemistry on the screen, and great chemistry goes a long way in these types of shows. Also, maybe the success just came from the Happy Days lead-in, that was arguably the biggest show in the world. Laverne and Shirley spin-off. It started strong, cult following, starting big. Maybe. And then extending from just the success of the show, this was a time when media was more limited and more refined, and whatever was on in the primetime slot on a Sunday night, for example, that was the thing. You knew that your mum and dad were watching it, your neighbors were watching it, the bloke down the road was watching it, and it's like a cultural touchstone. So my question now is, was the world better off for having cultural touchstones like this? Nowadays, 2024, it's very hard to find common ground on media. I would say the Game of Thrones was probably the most recent cultural touchstone where you could be confident that if you saw a random person, you could be confident they probably were watching Game of Thrones, and it was a cultural touchstone. It connected us. Well, since that point, I don't know. And side note, not to be too rambly, I don't want to upset Be Happy Dude, but the end of Game of Thrones really hurt me and a lot of people in the world. So even though that was our most recent cultural touchstone, the ending was so bad and they rushed it because the producers wanted to go make Star Wars. Scumbags, man. They deprived us all of a core, finish to a big part of our lives. So was the world better off for having something like Laverne and Shirley or Happy Days that it connected most people, would be my question. Now, before I recorded, I ran this by my dad. So this one I've written from Dad. Did people want to be like Laverne and Shirley? Were they almost role models, icons in a sense, or almost all their two male neighbors? Did people look at these characters and connect to them in the sense that they fashion themselves based off it? Which, to go back to the earlier point, would be a credit to the good writing of the show and potentially the subverting of expected gender roles. And final point, also from my dad, were Laverne and Shirley precursors to Thelma and Louise? Now, I would have to... this video would become too rambly if I touched on Thelma and Louise in this video. But you can do your own research. My dad, pretty smart fella, he might be onto something there. So that, I would consider that adequate context for you to access this build in WYVERN and Shirley. Alright, what are we cooking up here? This build is horrendous. It's terrible. It's stupid. We have a WYVERN and we have 3 Shrimpies or Shirleys. We're sniping front units. There is an unintended element of synergy in that because the Mantis Shrimp is tier 6 and the WYVERN is giving us more level up options, leveling up, we're able to level our Mantis Shrimps better. And that was not intended by Hawkman. Maybe it was. Maybe subconsciously he did connect to that. Has this run over yet? Or... Oh, that was good stuff, eh? Well, we're seeing the end of the build. I said recently, I'm done Occasionally I'll do a little bit of clickbaiting or whatever, but I'm really done just chasing views. And this is as stupid as it can get. This guy's build, if you go back, and I'm not going to do it, you can look at his build. He was cooking up something cool or something, I don't know, but I kind of just crushed it. Psych, I drew. Would I recommend you do this build? Absolutely not, unless you are a fan of the 1976 sitcom that ran for 8 seasons, Laverne and Shirley. If not, just don't worry about it, and just put WYVERN in your pack. It's so good. I'm not going to change the way I pronounce it. This guy's team is insane, and that's the build. With thanks to you for watching, and with special acknowledgement to Be Happy Dude, I will aim to be better in future videos. Goodbye. One more thing before the video ends. This video right here, Seagull Roulette, potentially the best video or best run I've ever had. It didn't really get much exposure and views, so if you haven't seen that yet, link in the description, and thanks for watching.